Mhm. So, good afternoon, Atlanta parent buddy parents. We are here today with Miss Felicia Moore. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself and her run for mayor here in Atlanta.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and certainly I'm glad that you did, because I have a lot of things that I think we will find in common. But my name is Felicia Moore, and I'm a candidate for mayor of Atlanta. Currently, I serve as the president of the Atlanta City Council. So first, I want to just first tell you a little bit about who I am, how I came to do this, and what my platform is in brief. And then if you need some more details, I got a lot of details. So first of all, I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. And what drew me to Atlanta was when I was in high school, senior in high school, we did a bus tour of historically Black colleges and universities across the country. And we knew that Atlanta was on the list. So a group of us, we had heard about this place called Atlanta. We were so excited to be here. And we kind of conspired. And at night, we snuck away from our chaperones. We got in a cab and we went down to Cisco's nightclub on Hamilton Road in Southwest Atlanta. And being from Indianapolis, I thought I had died and woke up in Black Hollywood. I was just so impressed. The people were so beautiful. They were professional. They party. And that was like the impression of a lifetime. And so Atlanta stayed on my mind. I said, if I ever move from home, this is the place I want to live. But I didn't go here to school. I went to school at Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, graduated cum laude with a degree in communications. I pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, went home, worked for a while, and then had an opportunity to come back to Atlanta and a visit for extended stay to see if I really wanted to live here. And of course, you just had to get me in Atlanta. I wasn't coming back. So I moved to Atlanta. And then by 91, I purchased my first home in Northwest Atlanta off of Bolton Road in the Riverside community. And the very first day I was moving in, my parents were helping me unload the U-Haul, and a gentleman drove up in his car and said, "Hey, we're starting a neighborhood association." And my dad, who was a union worker, assembly line worker at Ford Motor Company, and my mom, who was an executive assistant for Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, were always actively engaged in the community. So Dad said, "You go with him, Mom and I'll keep unpacking." So I went with him, got to talking, and before you know it, they made me president of the neighborhood association. So on my first day in the neighborhood, I became president, then got involved head first in fighting issues like hazardous waste burning, landfill expansions, created a youth program for the kids in the neighborhood, did Crime Watch. And then before you know it, they wanted me to chair the neighborhood planning unit. That was NPUD. So I became chair of NPU. And then great fortune would have it that I had met someone who was running for council who won, Gloria Brumell Tanubu in District 12, which was another district. And then she asked me to come work as an aide to her at City Hall. And that was where I really got to see what we wanted in the community and what worked and what didn't work at City Hall. And I tried to prod my council member to do certain things. He wouldn't do it. People were not happy with his service. And then they started to ask me to run for council. And I remember the day I decided to do it. I figured, you know what, I can continue trying to push to get things in the community that I know aren't going to happen because I know what needs to happen here at City Hall to get them done, or I can run. And then I said, if I'm going to run, I'm going to become the council member that I want to have. And that's what I set out to do. My theme was the issue is trust, because there were some ethical issues, and responsive leadership. Because people, what I wanted and what I know other residents want is elected officials that will respond to them, that will show up at meetings, will be involved and engaged, and really work hard on their behalf. And so I did that part in the community. I also was pretty much known at City Hall for doing what really council members are supposed to do, is the policy work. I've passed numerous pieces of legislation, authored numerous pieces, was one that served on finance committee and transportation committee. I've served on every committee, chaired many of those committees. Was a watchdog for our dollars at City Hall. And then I ran for president when that seat came open after 5 terms on council. And so I'm currently the president. I ended up running for mayor because at a point in time during president, our mayor was certainly working very heavily in the Biden campaign, and it was thought that she may leave to go to DC. So I'm a good Girl Scout. I want to be prepared. So I started preparing for what happens if she leaves, because our charter would have had me as the president serve out the unexpired term, and preparing to run. And then she didn't leave, so I had to make another decision, which was a very quick one, to go ahead and continue to run for mayor. Because frankly, I love serving, but if I'm not able to be effective, I prefer not to be in the way. I realized that at this point in my service at city, I wanted to put my hands on the wheel to really be able to steer the city in a better direction. And there were so many issues coming up, which are part of my platform. So I'll talk about those. The number one issue, and I believe the biggest threat to our city right now, is the uptick in crime. So I want to make sure that every neighborhood, no matter what the income bracket or zip code, is safe across our city. The second piece is our city services. I talk with the people who do the work, the frontline workers. I'm unique in that instance. And so I know more than others about each and every department that's dysfunctional, mismanaged, low morale, bad equipment, bad facilities. And until you have a mayor that's going to focus on that, we're not going to get the outcomes that we deserve. I say that Atlanta does the big things great, but what we haven't done is paid attention to our foundation, which is crumbling, and the basic operational things of the city. And then finally, in my platform are the things that I'm best known for, and the things I best use as the tenets of my service. Transparency. I believe people need to know where their money is going and what's being spent, that it's being spent wisely and not abused. 2, what we're up to at City Hall, what we're doing, so that citizens can have input and engagement, making sure that we do things ethically, because we have to restore the public trust, which we have lost. And I've passed many pieces of legislation about that. And then we're accountable to the people we serve. And then we hold people accountable when they don't do right. The last 2 things I'll mention are legislation that I authored as president. One is the first ever inspector general and compliance officer in the city that will hold elected officials, employees, and others accountable for not following the law, and independent procurement review officers to try to address some of the issues related to this cloud of corruption that's still over City Hall related to our procurement. So we have independent eyes watching and letting council know before they vote, in fact, if there's some problems. And that's the quick platform. Of course, there's many other issues: housing affordability, our unsheltered population, infrastructure, both above ground and below ground. All of those are issues and more that need to be addressed at the city. So I'm running to be our next mayor because I believe we're at a critical point in this city, and it's time to have new leadership. And some will say, well, you've been there 25 or 24 years. Why haven't you got it done? That's because I haven't been mayor. But what I have gotten done is I've been a very effective council member and council president, and I've done my work, and I've done it well. And I want to do well and fight for the citizens in a role that gives me the power, the authority, and the ability to get it done.
Well, thank you so much for giving us that, quick overview, because that was quick, but that was really good.
Thank you.
During this pandemic, me and Sherry, we birthed a parent group on Facebook called Atlanta Parent Buddy, just a regular group. And we wanted to get parents together in Atlanta public school and we wanted to make sure that they was connected to different resources.
Mhm.
Um, we're well over 100 parents right now, and one of the good things that I can say that me and Cher was able to do was not only was we able to connect them to resources, but the family who was about to go homeless, because even though we had a lot of housing, we had the eviction moratorium, people were still getting displaced. And so me and Sherry was able to connect parents to resources where people got a voucher, but now it's 2021. They still have these vouchers, and a lot of them is living out of hotels and, doubling up with family and stuff like that. And so, how do you feel, or what do you think that you can do, to help change that? Because housing and homelessness is a big issue, and it's even a bigger issue when it comes to the women and kids here in Atlanta.
And that, as well as the housing affordability beyond the evictions, are certainly displacing families. So I think there has to be fought on a lot of fronts. I tell people, and we can go into more detail, dealing with the unsheltered population is a very difficult task because people run on a spectrum. But I'm going to specifically deal about the families in housing. You know, I believe that you all are doing exactly what needs to happen, and that is to be able to identify the people early on and quickly. One, if we can help stabilize where they are so they don't have to move, but if they do, to quickly rehouse them so that they don't find themselves in another position. One of the things that we had to our advantage is post-COVID, we have gotten a lot of federal funds. I do know we've put money towards that. We do have a housing opportunity bond for the, not housing opportunity, a homeless opportunity bond where we have finances. So we need to make sure that we have the facilities to do it, which comes to sometimes the other issue is communities and everybody wants us to do something. And I'm saying us as in the city to do something about the unsheltered. But when you try to create a new facility or open a new facility, then you get pushback from the community because they don't want the facility. So that's a
Mhm.
problem. Also, we've got to deal more collectively with Fulton County, which is Health and Human Services. They've got to be a part of the equation, as well as in the metro area, because I'm finding that some areas in our metro area don't provide any assistance on any level to any of people in that spectrum of unsheltered. And so our resources that we have in the city get tapped because people will bring them to Atlanta, like, go to Atlanta and we'll help. But I think that we need to look at the only way we can really do it is really look at having our own housing where we're able to put people immediately so that they don't have to leave the city or go into, because I don't think we even have any extended stays inside the city limits proper. So most of them are like right on the outskirts, and they may have to try to have their kids travel back and forth. But I mean, I think that that is certainly an area of many in this unsheltered spectrum. Frankly, it's going to get worse before it gets better because we just are beginning to see people put out on the street because these eviction moratoriums had ended.
And to that point, I personally have lived in an extended stay myself with my family. And I know, to your point, they're on the outskirt. And if parents can't get connected to the resources, which that's what me and Sherry do, the school can provide transportation and other resources to help the parents, regardless of wherever they are in the city, and they can be in another county. If they fall under the McKinnon Veto Act, if you're familiar with that,
I am not.
there's a lot of great resources for parents. I put it in the group earlier on when I seen that the started taking place. But I know that's a really big resource. And when you get some time, go look it up. It's a federal law, and there's a whole bunch of wraparound services for families, their city. So so funny. Me and Sherry went down to the state school office, and we ended up getting some resources just so that we can learn. What, it was a year or two ago, we could learn more about that, and we can share that with our families, because people just don't know. That's just the undergod truth. A lot of people don't know where certain, resources are, and what is that? How did that work? And so me and Sherry always try to break it down in layman's terms so that our families can understand, what's happening. Um, I always say all this lead back to education. But speaking of crime, I was born and raised here. And the cool part, like you just mentioned, I was actually born and raised right up the sidewalk from where you live. I was born in the old pair apartments long, long, long time ago. I look young, but I'm mature.
Okay.
So I was born and raised over there. And even though the I would say the city or world looked at the housing project as a bad thing, I do remember this sense of my neighbors looked out for me. They took care. They made sure if I needed something, they were there. I don't see that as much anymore. And I don't know if you know, but I'm a part of APA, a Public Safety and Education Committee. And so one of my tasks is bringing back the neighborhood watch, because that's kind of what we had over there when I was growing up. We had the neighborhood watch, and all the neighbors looked out for us, and they made sure that we were safe on the street. Um, and it's so scary because crime has went up, a lot. And so, what do we do? What can we do as a parent to
Right.
help you as the future mayor of Atlanta?
Well, and I just want to briefly touch on, because you touched on one of the points in my public safety platform. So I just want to briefly touch on that, and then it may answer your question. I can go more deep into that. So, one thing I will say is that when you have an issue like crime uptick, and it becomes the focal point of any campaign, particularly when people are running, that everybody in terms of candidates want to say the magic thing to make you say, I'll vote for you. And so I just would tell people to be very cautious about that, because there's, telling you what you want to hear versus telling you what you need to know, and what's really a reality that can be done. And sometimes you can be told what you want to hear, and then you'll find out later you don't get it. But so I really am pragmatist. I want to be very realistic about what can happen. And so I look at 5 areas that we need to address, and you'll appreciate some of them from your comments. One are the cops. The second is the courts. The third, and in no particular order, is code enforcement, the children, and the community. So on the cops end, my vision is to get a good leadership for the department that shares my vision. That means that they keep our city safe, but that citizens also feel safe when they interact with our police. We've got to get the numbers of our officers up. Immediately, I'd like to see if we can get at least a minimum of 8 hours of the officers who are behind the desk out on the street to back up the patrol officers, so we have more presence on the street, and they can handle the low-level calls that might take an officer out of service for an hour or two, like an accident on the road or a noise complaint. So our officers are freed up. Also want to make sure we have mental and behavioral health interveners, people who are not officers who can respond to those calls, that are professionals that can deal with it. So you don't have to have somebody with the gun to do it. And so I want to make sure that we are addressing that and making sure that that is a part of it. And then, of course, we need to recruit officers. We lost about 500 to 700. As many of those as I can incentivize to come back for a while we recruit, I'd like to do that. At the end of the day, the officers, however, are doing a great job. They're arresting people. And so the other piece comes in with the courts, seeing what we can do, and using the bully pulpit of the mayor to keep them from letting repeat and violent offenders out. Also, I want to use leverage the resources we have in the city. If somebody's a first offender, what can we do to make sure they're not a second or third offender. If they are an offender and they've been convicted and they've served their time, what can we do to help them not go back to criminal behavior? Because a lot of times they have a hard time finding work. And so we can use our workforce development agency and our partnerships with other organizations to try to get them in job readiness training and get them the work that they need. The other piece is code enforcement. A lot of this stuff is happening in and around bars and nightclubs and restaurants and lounges. We need to let them know that we do have laws and we have rules. And I love nightlife. Remember, I told you I went to Cisco, so I'm not against nightlife, and it's a good revenue generator for the city. But what we just need to make sure is that they're following the rules and that we're enforcing the rules. And then the children, which I think my platform on that sort of speaks to your question. And this is something we've got to work on. As you know, we're number one for income inequality in the city, and we have generational poverty and issues. I really want to see how we can not just have lip service, but really partner with our public schools. I have many ideas. One of them is when school lets out, as opposed to just letting the kids out on the street to go home and mama's probably working and they're being a latchkey kid. Why can't we have those buses take these kids directly to a recreation center, partner with our nonprofit partners, help them with their homework, feed them their meal. After that, let them do recreation. Let's find out what the kids want to do, not what we as adults think they want to do. I'd like to even work on, some of the trades and get them in. Maybe they can fix up cars or learn STEM. I did add more girls in STEM program, targeting young girls in underserved community. Kids really will gravitate to that. And in many of these communities, they're not exposed to other options. So let's do that. And then later in the evening, working with the public schools, let the buses come, pick them up, and then drop them off at home. And my vision there is that we close this window of vulnerability that they have when they're just kind of out there with no supervision and can end up in a gang or end up doing something that they shouldn't do. And that's one of many ways that I think that we can work with our youth. And then finally, the community. We got a big part in this too. It's not all about who the mayor is or the chief is or the officers. All of us have a part to play. And I want to go back old school too, just what you said. When I was a neighborhood president, the proudest moment we had as a neighborhood is when we got that neighborhood watch sign in our neighborhood. We've, got our block captains together and we were watching out for each other, and crime decreased in the neighborhood. But let's expand that. Let's get neighborhood watches working. Let's get business watches. Let's get high-rise watches. What am I trying to say? Apartment complex watches. I mean, these perpetrators are not invisible. And the more eyes helping and watching out for each other, the better. So that's sort of the crime platform, and it's in line with some of the things that you just mentioned.
Thank you so much for that. I recently did the neighborhood watch training, and I was blown away by all the resources that they had, that's there for the community. And so I look to kick off my first neighborhood watch maybe next month for my community. We're going to get our meeting going. And so that's very important. And I'm so happy to hear that. But I'm a hush, and I'm turning over to Miss Sherry. And I'm going to
let. One other thing I want to say, because you've reminded me, because I've got lists and lists of ideas, and when you're running, you can't wear people out with every idea you have. But I do, since Tashay is on there, to make a note to make sure as we're rolling out the platform that we put in. You mentioned resources, and I did it as council member, and I want to do it as mayor. And you're right, there are people keep saying, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. But a lot of these things are already out there and people aren't taking advantage of it. And one of the things I wanted to do is make sure that our constituent services office or some office is responsible for looking at and compiling a place where people can go. And there are other places, like United Way has it, but other places where people can go. So if it's seniors, if you're a senior, here's some of your resources. If you're a parent, here are some resources. Those that we provide at the city, the county, the state level, and even the federal level. And I think that we need to learn how to utilize those and to take advantage of the fact that we need to push them out to the community so that they will use them. So I thank you for reminding me about the resource piece, because I think people don't realize that a lot of things that they need and want in the community, somebody else is doing it, they just don't know.
It's already there. That is so
Mhm.
true. And I noticed that doing some work in the health, because I focus on health, housing, transportation, education. And I learned that trying to put together I was working on this national thing where we was focusing on how Black women are dying during childbirth. And so when we went to go gather the resource list, we was like, we don't even have to create one. It's one already there. Only thing we got to do is just update it and share it with the community. Being that, you know, people prayers are answered, and you don't have to worry about calling and going places, you know, especially if you don't have a car. I'm a multi transportation family, so I don't drive myself, you know, but we have cars in our family, and I use, you know, Lyft, and I bike and all that good stuff too. So, you know, just making sure that if they're going through something, we don't make it more stressful, you know, because it's already there. You know, only thing we have to do is, and that's me and Sherry mission. Like I said, if it works, let us know. If it don't work, let us know, because we can go back and say, hey, this worked, and hey, this didn't work. So I'm gonna step back. You got the flow, Sherry. You muted.
You're on mute,
Oh
Sherry.
yeah. I wanted to ask you, in Atlanta, we noticed that parents are often overlooked, and a parent cannot be confident if they don't know about resources. And I noticed the past mayors, they never had parents as part of their advisory board. So if you become mayor, or when you become mayor,
That's correct.
will you be willing to have parents a part of your advisory board?
Most definitely, and I'm asking Tashay to make a note of this, because I just thought of something. That's why I love having conversations with the community, because you all are helping me make my platform even better. So one thing that I recognize, I'm kind of go back to my MPU days and my neighborhood days, is there seems to be in Atlanta a disconnect. And why I'm saying a disconnect is that I remember so clearly having neighborhood meetings, and many people from the neighborhood who had kids didn't come because they were going to the meetings that you had related to kids and the PTA. So I think we've got to find a way, and I'm going to add that to my platform about how we work with schools, is we've got to work on a way that we can bring them both together, because or either share information somehow, because to have a set of adults off on one side and another set of adults on another, and there's no communications between them, that's difficult. And so, yes, I think if we start to have those conversations, as mayor, you know, making sure I'm attending some of those meetings. But I do think we got to find a way to have some sort of a collaborative or a meeting where we bring both, you know, we have a PTA MPU meeting so everybody can meet each other. And, you know, maybe twice a year, we just have hopefully post-COVID, we'll be post-COVID, and we can all physically and virtually, because you have to do things now hybrid, meet together and talk, because I just think there's a big disconnect between the parents and just the people who may be parents or not parents, but are more active and engaged on the neighborhood politics versus school politics.
Yeah, because with the current mayor, I noticed that was part of the issue. A lot of the crimes and so forth were school age children, and she have yet to reach out to parents. She meet with everybody else except the parents. So for this new mayor, we would love the mayor to be in partnership with parents because it's crucial.
Mhm. I think you're correct. And, when you're talking about the issues of those task force and things that are looking at youth, that would be a natural thing. And so, yes, I will be more than happy to do it. And I'm sure if I actually got too busy or overlooked it, you will remind me. And you
Yes.
have my number, so you know how to reach me. Say, hey, what about the parents? But
Yeah.
no, I think that you're exactly right. And that's why I want to make sure I'm making the point on the connections with the public schools. You all just reminded me about that fact that I knew was an issue that we will add as part of what I want to do, is making sure that we're reaching out, engaging, and being a part of. Because I think what needs to happen too is when we're shooting out information, because from when I'm mayor, I believe in transparency and let people know what's going on. You just made me reminded that information doesn't need to stop at the MPU and neighborhood level. We also need to be shooting that out to all the various school-related organizations and groups, because you're citizens too.
Mm-hmm. That's
Thank
true.
you.
And but I've noticed, and I know it's so funny because I drag Sherry along to this just my little thing. I don't like to be by myself sometimes. So I'm like, Sherry, listen, because maybe you heard something different. And to your point, I noticed in the MPU, I've been going for maybe 3 years now, and I just love virtual because it allows me to be in 4 meetings at one time. You know how you jump off one and you in another one, and I'm right behind you. I be in all of them at the same time. And so I like to listen and see what's being said. But one thing I noticed, it's very few parents there. It's always business owners and homeowners and, the representative. And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of our families, I just learned 2018. We don't even know anything about the MPU. A lot of us are not heavily involved in PTA. Me and Sherry are like, oh my gosh, we are like in everything. Sherry actually, and I'm so proud of her, she has a education committee in her MPU now. And so
MPUL.
yes, and it's just parents just taking a lead and doing exactly what you did when you got here, start being engaged. But I think it starts back to education. It was, do the parents know about what the MPU is? Do the parents know, that they have the council meeting, and you can call in, because I be sad sometimes when I see the council meeting. I always get the notice from you. I noticed that. I don't get the notice from nobody else but you. You are the only one I be seeing posting it on your page. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Sherry, I got to run. We got council, we got committee, we got transportation, and to that point, when I was on Cascade, my kids went to tag. And so one thing, as a mom on the PTA and the GO team, I was the vice chair at the time. We were able to make sure that our streets were safe. So we created this walking school bus of grandparents, dads and moms and aunts and uncles. And they, because, Cascade is that cut through and it's really busy, everybody would meet at the end of the street on Cascade, and they would get in the line and walk up to the school building. And so that was one thing that we was able to do. And luckily we was able to get a tag to tech partnership, because I end up connecting the school with our NPUS. And then we connected with the city. We connected with the transportation committee, the transportation commissioner, Josh Rowan. And he was able to come to my kids' school and just talk to them. And he actually brought his crew with him. And so when I tell you, the kids' eyes lit up to see this beautiful Black girl who is doing stuff around transportation. She's possibly an engineer. And the kids were just so excited to see that. So once you become mayor, what is your plan for our terrible, unsafe streets we have here in Atlanta? Oh my gosh. I know it's so small, but it plays a huge role, because a lot of people, I didn't realize it, so many people walked to the West End or to Kroger or to the school or to the MPU meeting. We have a lot of people that walked around our neighborhood, but the streets were so unsafe. And I was so happy to be able to be mentioned in the One Atlanta transportation plan, but we still have a long ways to go. So I would love to hear, what do we need to do? For me, I think we need more street lights and sidewalks, for example. But what do you see needs to be done, and how can we help you get it done?
Well, let me go back to one thing that you mentioned, and that's part of what I want to do with the public schools, and the platform is to expose the kids to City Hall. I mean, I think we have so many learning opportunities, and I just know as a kid, those exposure points ends up kind of directing you, on what you might want to do as an adult. I mean, we have wastewater treatment facilities, we have water facilities, we have people who are engineers, as you said, police officers, firefighters, the gamut, and mayors and elected officials, making sure that the kids really have a synergy with our schools, because we might be growing the next group of elected officials or city employees. And so I think we need to use that, making sure that they have tours and exposure. I'd love to bring back the officer friendly program where the younger kids will have a positive interaction with police officers, and firefighters come and help do that training. So I believe there are many ways that we can do that, and we should be doing that. I think the disservice happened when of course, we have an independent school system, and we've allowed, because the fact that we have two different governing bodies, that we are separate when we need to be bringing it back together. And there are ways that we can work together. So that's certainly a part of my plan.
I'm so glad to hear that. When you just said officer friendly, that program, oh my gosh, the 70s, the 80s, like that was so instrumental for a lot of us who was in APS. I went to CM Picks Elementary right next to Archer High School. And so when I seen them, the stuff that I see today, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with. They were always polite. They came in, they read to us. They came in, they just did so much stuff. We played in the gym, and we jump rope, and we did head, shoulder, knees, and toes. Like, that's what I remember. I
remember our officer friendly and fire department were the ones that would come and teach us how to cross the street safely, stop, drop, and roll if you get on fire, what not to do, why, say. So I think that, those are ways that we can expose kids, number one, and have them have a positive aspect, and maybe motivate some of them to want to be those things. But I think that the kids, if they live in the city, should know how their city operates. And I believe there are many educational opportunities. I also want to see our recreation centers, and I'm going to come up with another name, because we need to recalibrate that whole thing. All kids don't want to necessarily play basketball or swim or whatever. We need to use those facilities. As I told you, I did a program as president called More Girls in STEM. It ended up the boys infiltrated it. So I guess it's now More Kids in STEM, where we would expose middle school kids to science, technology, engineering. And then we also add arts and math. And believe me, the experience is just exposing them to that was phenomenal. We've got some a Miles School who's getting a robotics team out of it. But I like to bring those kinds of activities where the kids actually think they're playing and learning something new, but to bring those to our recreation center. I'd like to work with our union leadership. You have them that train in the electric union, electrics, plumbing, carpentry, a whole lot of different things. Why can't they come and use our recreation center for those kids who are mechanically inclined or have an interest in that? Then they can start training and learn how to do that. And then particularly when they get in high school, if they're not interested in going to a university or a college, because I know there's not a lot of vocational training taking place in our schools, and so we can get them interested in that, and then certainly partner with Atlanta Technical College or Metropolitan College or others to have a good pipeline for them. Because if we're going to change this narrative of Atlanta having the wealth inequality, having generational poverty, the quickest way to do it, that's a longer route to get to, is to start with our kids, because in 10 years they will be, if they're 10 now, they'll be adults in the next 10 years. And if we've already reached them and they are welders or plumbers, or they're making some sort of a living for themselves that's positive, then their brothers and sisters and their next generation or their kids will have something to build on. And I believe that our leadership over the years, again, like I said, we've done these big things well. Atlanta is definitely an economic development place, but we also got to make sure that we're developing our people.
I really like it. One last question, and Sherry, I'll turn it over to you to get ready to close us out. To Sherry's point, a lot of adults had, especially parents, they've been left out. And so we have a lot of parents. My mother, I grew up with a single grandmother. And so I seen that a lot in my neighborhood. I see it now, advocating for my children in their school. I see it. What can we do together to change that? How can we, I heard you mention Atlanta Tech. My son actually came back home maybe 2 weeks ago, and he's over in Atlanta Tech for welding. He did want to go to Georgia Tech for astro something. So something dealing with fixing on the spaceships or something. And so he didn't make it. So he said, Mom, I'm gonna go do this. And I thought it was a great idea. But for families who have been working and making $2 to $5 and $7 here in this city for a very long time. I came out making $5.25 when I got my first job. What can we do here? What programs, and we don't have to reinvent, but what programs could you put in place to help get moms and dads, working well, that they can earn a meaningful living and they can provide for their children. And their children don't feel like they have to go out and, get in trouble or commit crimes and stuff in order to, support the family.
So again, it goes back to resources. There are resources out of the city and in the city that people can take advantage of. And one of the main focuses I'm going to have is making sure we get our workforce development agency up and running and managed well, so that we can use that for job readiness training, and then to help to try to identify places and then people to match them up for some of these meaningful jobs. And so we're going to also be working with our school system. We got a lot of universities and stuff here that can help and assist. And I'll end with this because unfortunately, on my schedule, I've got other things to do. But, I was thinking of my run for mayor, and I was thinking about all of the challenges that the city has. And just when I got to that moment of wanting to jump off the cliff and of despair, this breath of fresh air blew over me. And I realized, you know what? Atlanta is a great city. We're not a struggling city. We've got great resources. We've got great people, a great philanthropic community, nonprofit community, parents who are like yourself that are engaged, the corporate community, the faith community, and the list goes on and on. But what it needs is a mayor that recognizes that and understands what our needs are and can bring to the table people and allow them to the table, because I've heard that a lot. People want to help, but they haven't had anybody to let them help. And then we can solve these issues together. And I think the best thing that I got from you all today, which is a reminder of something that I recognized was an issue a while back, is to thank you, because I will certainly be adding and making sure that we find some way to create a new synergy between the school system and the city as it relates to the organizations that support the school system and the parents. And I also want to make this point too, because I heard you say it earlier. Another part of my platform is I want to make sure while we're developing our youth that we support the families, and particularly single mothers that are headed up. Because if we can gift them up and lift them up and get them a good job, then the kids will have no reason to not be kids. I don't think kids should have the daunting responsibility of trying to support a family. And so the way to do that is support the parents.
Felicia Moore, on behalf of Atlanta Parents Buddy Facebook group, we thank you for coming and blessings on your journey for mayor.
Thank you so very much.
How can they get in contact with you?
Sure, very easily. I'm at no, that's not me. I'm at FeliciaMooreForMayor.com. And if you go to the website, FeliciaMooreForMayor.com, please sign up to volunteer. We've got many opportunities. I'm sure my campaign manager would get me if I didn't say that. And you can contribute. We certainly can use those dollars, but I'm asking people to more, if nothing else, to spread the word. You don't realize the power of your voice. Everybody isn't in tune. And a lot of times if you say, this is who I'm supporting, then others will do that. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your support. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And are you on social media too? Let's make sure we push your media out.
Oh, yes, we're on Facebook, Felicia Moore.
Okay.
We're on Instagram, More for Atlanta, and we're on Twitter.
Parents, you heard it. Go check her out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, FeliciaMooreForMayor.com.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank y'all.